All right, and we're live. I'm here with Robin, I guess it is.
Yeah, it's Robin.
Okay. So yeah, I'm just gonna let you introduce yourself to everybody, what you're all about, and So go ahead.
As you said, I'm Robin. I'm on Twitter as Techie Folks. People might know me as Rex here as well. I'm trans, which is kind of why you're talking to me on this one. And what I'm all about is sitting on my ass playing video games.
Alrighty. Do you have a YouTube channel or?
I do have a YouTube channel. Yeah.
Feel free to pimp that out while you're here. Always let a guest do
I can't remember what I called it, to be honest. It's fine.
All right. So I think I first started interacting with you on Twitter, and it's been very positive interactions primarily. When I was still writing for Reaction, I think it was the response to the article I wrote on why only men write for Reaction, if memory serves. Which actually, that wasn't even my policy, but I was charged with writing the article because I was, as Bruce put it, the most diplomatic amongst the group. But yeah, I think that was my earliest interactions with you, and it's been primarily positive. I've followed you back and all that. It's been I kind of got to put I don't how should I put this? I gotta mark your tweets as sensitive a lot.
Yeah.
So I'll say that much because I do check my Twitter at work far more often than
I am very sorry to everyone who follows me and checks their Twitter at work.
But anyways, I just wanted to get into the now. I should say for the audience, for those of you that don't know me, I am a right-leaning guy, and I don't know how to say this without sounding like a dad here, but I don't approve of transsexualism.
Oh, you transphobe.
I know. I'm very transphobic, as that were. Because that's the dichotomy in our civilization now. You're either throwing someone a parade or throwing them in the oven. Those appear to be
exactly. You're a monster, or you're just the greatest person ever.
Yeah. Anyways, so the first question I guess I would have for a trans person is, look, obviously what's the official medical term now? I guess it is gender dysphoria disorder.
Okay, I don't exactly know because they change it so often. I think in
that's sort of
DSM-5, it's really confusing. I don't know how anyone's supposed to keep up if I can't. In DSM-5, they changed the dysphoria is the feeling of discomfort with your own body, and that's the bit they've changed to the disorder. So I actually don't know which one is the approved term in terms of transgender or transsexual, because some people get upset by being called transgender and some people get upset by being called transsexual. So it's a bit of a minefield, and I don't think there actually is a right answer there.
Well, as I understand it, the disorder is, in layman's terms, that somebody is born with essentially the mental wiring of the opposite sex. And so the treatment prescribed these days is that we're going to make that person resemble the opposite sex, basically.
Exactly. They give you the hormones and things.
Strictly speaking, you obviously can't change a sex. That kind of technology doesn't even exist in Star Trek. But
you can't change things fully. You can only you can change people's hormone composition and develop secondary sexual characteristics and that sort of thing. But you can't change fully. It's not possible at the moment.
But I guess my main question would be, why is that the appropriate treatment rather than trying to get the mind and the mind in line with what the body actually is?
Well, I mean, my answer on this is always, the mind is you. I would rather have my body changed than my brain changed, because if you change my brain, you're changing who I am. And other than, my body, I'm quite happy with who I am. I don't really want to change that. All I wanted was to more resemble how I felt, so I could be happier with myself. And for me, that's worked very well. I feel a lot happier now. I don't suffer from the dysphoria in the way that I did. For me, I feel it's been the right treatment. Whereas if someone tried to change my brain, I think I'd still be miserable, because, well, you can't really change people's brains. You don't have the ability to do that either, and B, I wouldn't feel like myself.
Okay. Well, I'm not really sure how successful, and I obviously can't speak to your personal, situation, so I'm not trying to. But generally speaking, I'm not sure how successful the other approach is with people, because trans still have tremendously high suicide rates.
Yeah, but so do men. And no one's saying that that's a problem with being male.
Well, true. But it's much higher proportionately.
Well, yeah, but you have to think about how trans people are treated in society, how we're viewed, the stereotypes we have to put up with, how people are treated by their families. It's lesser an impact of being of your disorder, and more impact of how you're treated because of said disorder.
Well, then are we seeing the suicide rates drop?
I don't know if there's been any studies on that recently.
Because, we're definitely seeing, right or wrong, we're seeing more acceptance in society. So we should be seeing the suicide rates drop. I would be interested in what the numbers are.
Interesting study to do, to see if we are seeing the suicide rates drop. I don't know of any study that's looked into that, so I can't give you a definitive answer. I would expect that in Western countries where acceptance is growing, you probably see a lowered suicide rate for trans people. But again, I can't say that with confidence, because I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know either. I don't have numbers. It's just it seems like a way to test the theory that the suicide rate is more the result of how they're treated.
Exactly, and I personally would like to see more research into trans issues, but it's such a sort of niche issue that there's not a huge amount of funding for people to do this kind of research. So the studies are kind of few and far between, and the sample sizes are generally very low. So we kind of have to.
And again, like I joked earlier, it's such a politically charged issue.
Exactly. I mean, if there was something, if there was something that showed that the suicide rates weren't dropping, that would be obviously very politically charged, and people would want to interpret it one way or the other.
Well, the other thing I would point out is there is a neurological disorder, and I'm certainly not a doctor, so I don't know exactly what causes this, where people can't accept a certain part of their body as their own. Body integrity disorder, where their right hand or their left hand, what have you, just doesn't feel like a part of them. The nerves aren't working right. It feels like a foreign attachment on them, and it's just a constant irritant. And a lot of these people try to cut that limb off if they can survive without it.
I apologize for the cat, by the way.
It's no problem. I have a snoring dog usually in these live streams. So
okay.
And obviously, doctors don't consider that the appropriate
well, no, I mean,
treatment.
Cutting your own limbs off is going to handicap you.
Well,
whereas transitioning obviously isn't going to handicap you. So, I mean, I don't see the two as comparable personally. I've never had this sort of issue where, I mean, there's this assumption that being transgender, especially male to female, is all about cutting your dick off, and that's very much a stereotype. And that's where this comparison comes from. It's like, well, they want to cut their dick off and they want to cut their hands off, and that's not it at all. Trans people, well, generally healthy, sane trans people don't want to cut their dick off. I have known a couple of people that did, but they were very weird, troubled people. It's not the same thing. I mean, I'm personally very much on the fence about whether I want to go through with the whole sort of final operation thing, because it's kind of weighing up the pros and cons. But I mean, even that operation doesn't involve just chopping your dick off and leaving you with nothing.
Well, yeah, I
reconstituting.
I figured they don't bring out a pair of bolt cutters.
No, they don't bring out a pair of bolt cutters. You're left with, still a sort of functional sexual organ. The only thing that you can't do, obviously, is breed. But I mean, we don't stop people getting vasectomies. There we go. Mm-hmm. We don't stop people getting vasectomies or any other method of not breeding. So we don't consider that a handicap. So I don't view it as the same as chopping a limb off, which is going to handicap you. That is obviously a detriment to a person.
Well, it still seems like is the question, should we bring the mind in line with the body or the body in line with the mind?
Well, I mean, I think it depends. In terms of the situation you just raised, where someone wants to cut their limb off, then I think you should try and bring the mind in line with the body as much as can be done, because chopping a limb off is going to negatively impact that person, whereas transition is generally going to positively impact a person, and it doesn't leave them handicapped. So
the other thing I'd like to bring up, which again I just would like to hear a transsexual's answer to this.
Sure.
The hospital and medical, I guess the doctor in the hospital that pioneered.
You're going to talk about St. John's, is it? John Hopkins?
I think,
John Hopkins.
Yeah,
they've actually started treating trans people again, so that's a bit out of date now.
Oh, is it? Because the doctor that pioneered the surgery has said that he does not believe it's a benefit.
Yeah, Paul McHughes said that. He's a bit of a well-known quack. He's the same guy that he's got a bit of a bone to grind with the LGBT community. There's a suspicion that he actually started doing the surgery because he doesn't like gay people, and then when he realised, it wasn't really the same thing, he decided he didn't like it anymore. But he's now gone from John Hopkins, and because he's gone, his influence is gone. They've gone back to doing what everyone else does, which is the consensus among medical community, which is to treat trans people with HRT and potentially surgery.
And as far as the handicap thing, and again, I'm not a doctor, so my knowledge is very layman. But when you do remove certain things down there, say the testicles, for example, you do alter the hormone balance a lot, which, I mean, I hate to sound crude, but anybody that's, neutered or spayed a dog knows that, at the very least, they're going to gain a tremendous amount of weight. It can throw a lot of things off balance.
Well, I mean, trans people were already being treated with HRT. For instance, I'm on estrogen, obviously, and a drug called Androcure, which just blocks my testosterone production to begin with. Mm-hmm. So, there's my hormones are already balanced in a female way rather than a male way. So removing the testicles wouldn't really impact that, because the hormones are already provided for.
It does sort of leave you dependent on those drugs, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, you're already dependent on them. On certain drugs if you're trans, so it's not like it's a particular difference. But I don't see a huge issue with being dependent on taking a couple of estrogen pills in the morning. It's not particularly. It doesn't cause me any difficulty to pop a couple of pills on my tongue and swallow them.
And the other thing I would be remiss if I didn't bring up is a lot of this, I guess, theory on gender versus sex. A lot of this does come from John Money. And for those of you unfamiliar in the audience, John Money was essentially a mad scientist who pretty much has, 2 boys' suicides on his hands. So, I mean, have you looked into that? Is that something that,
I mean, I would argue that the gender sex thing from John Money is complete bullshit, and his own studies proved that it was bullshit, but also the fact that I cannot remember the name of the poor boy that committed suicide, but the fact that he was raised as a girl, but always felt that he was male, and eventually went back to being male. And he was raised as a girl because of a faulty circumcision.
Yes, it was put upon him. It wasn't.
Exactly. It was put upon him to be raised as a gender that he felt he wasn't mentally. And I think that's actually quite a good allegory for being transgender. I mean, he didn't want to be raised as that gender. He didn't feel he was that gender. And John Money argued that he could be raised as a girl, and because he would just be socialized as a girl, he would be happy with it. And he wasn't. And eventually, unfortunately, he killed himself because he was so unhappy with everything. And I think that's a good evidence that your mind can't be brought in line. You know, your mind is you. If you're raised as the wrong gender, regardless if it's because of a faulty circumcision or because of hormones screwing up in the womb, leading to your brain developing the wrong way, you always have that inherent sense of what gender you should be. So that's my interpretation of that. And in fact, I would view, actually, sorry to continue this, I would view being transgender as more of the birth defect than a mental defect, in that your body is what's wrong and your brain is what's right.
All right. Let's see. There's something else. Yeah, the New York law. That politically speaking, I generally lean to a live and let live kind of thing, but that doesn't seem to be an option with the LGBTQ LMNOP community these days. For instance, there's a law that was proposed in New York. I don't think it got through, but the mayor was pushing it, where businesses would be fined for misgendering someone.
Yeah, that's absolutely ridiculous. I don't know who they're pushing this through for the benefits of. I mean, there's a similar law being pushed in Canada, where if you don't use the right pronouns, you can face, I think they're even talking about a prison sentence. And it's absolutely insane. It doesn't benefit anyone. I mean, if someone gets your pronouns wrong, so what? I mean, people say, it might be a bit rude if they're doing it intentionally, but people say rude things all the time. Why are we supposed to be so special that we need to be protected from people being rude? It annoys me that they would even think to do that, to be quite honest.
All right. This is a lot of this is kind of interesting because I never, I never hear a transsexual actually explain anything to me because, generally they just point and shriek.
Yeah, that is a real problem that the community has. They just get offended by everything. And you can't say anything right. You can't ask the right questions. It's just educate yourself. Well, how am I supposed to do that if I can't talk to a trans person?
But again, I have to say I'm somewhat skeptical that a person's body hormones can really be that well balanced towards the opposite sex. That seems like you're kind of pushing water up a hill.
It's actually not that difficult. I mean,
there's a lot of medical problems that come from that.
Not really. I mean, I could show you my blood test results if you want, but everything's in the sort of the female range. It's not particularly difficult. It's just a case of blocking testosterone production and then regulating the amount of estrogen that you take to get that into the female range. And some people take progesterone on a sort of monthly cycle to obviously replicate a menstrual cycle. I don't, but some people do that. It's actually very simple. I mean, in terms of the actual point when you start taking the hormones and switch over, there are a few bumps in the road, but they're not serious complications. It's more things like hot flushes and dealing with the different impacts that hormones have on the brain. And there's quite a noticeable difference between the impact of estrogen and testosterone.
And the other thing I wanted to bring up with someone like you, these days that they're outright pushing this stuff on kids, and that's an absolute disaster. The legitimacy of this aside, a lot of these kids that think they're the opposite sex, and then they get to be a teenager, a young adult, they think that was all disaster because they're kids. They don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah.
Like what would you say to that?
I've definitely seen studies that suggest desistance, i.e. Not continuing with feelings of being transgender, are more common in children. I do not see a problem with children being allowed to live as the other gender if they want to, without obviously transitioning, because they're children and that would be a medical disaster. Because I don't think that's harmful. I don't see any problem with a little girl wanting to be called a boy or something. It's not going to do her any harm in my view. The current sort of recommended treatment, actually for that, is actually puberty blockers, whereby they prevent puberty so that they can have a more successful transition later on if they choose to transition. And if they don't, they can just stop taking the blockers, and then they'll have normal puberty as the gender they were born as. And as far as I'm aware, all the studies I've looked into suggested that is pretty much harmless. So I am personally okay with that. I am a little bit skeptical, though, about certain parents perhaps wanting to push these things on their children because it's a little bit trendy. And that's why I think it's very important we have good sort of psychological and medical oversight of any child that says they're transgender.
Well, I can't imagine that holding back puberty doesn't have all manner of unforeseen consequences. Again,
as far as I'm aware, the long-term studies have shown that it doesn't. I mean, these drugs are safe to use. I mean, it might sound to a layman like there's going to be consequences, but the only consequences you're going to just develop later than other people. I mean, the human body is extremely malleable when it comes to hormones. I mean, if I could grow breasts at 29, it's not going to cause problems for a child to wait until they're sort of 16 to give you puberty.
Well, again, I forgive me, I'm somewhat skeptical of the medical establishment right now, because it seems pretty clear that, to me, there's an orthodoxy being pushed for no other reason than I see increasing, movement to punish anyone that breaks away from it. The law I just mentioned again, and
yes,
that's in a country where, we have freedom of speech is far more enshrined in both culture and law here than even, say, Europe and Canada. And we still have this sort of stuff getting pushed on us.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think everyone has that sort of issue. I mean, you've got the same sort of thing in all kinds of science. Climate change, you've got anti-vaxxers. I mean, there's also all kinds of nonsense being pushed, but you can't really, the data kind of speaks for itself. It doesn't matter how much you push something, that the data is still the data, that this doesn't cause harm. And that's what I think people should make their decisions based off.
Okay. Again, like I said, I have not had a chance to speak to a transsexual, so a lot of this is not stuff I've heard.
No, there's not many of us that actually talk about this stuff, which is rather unfortunate, I think.
All right. Well, I'm going to go through a little bit of the chat here, because a couple of people were bringing up questions that I think are worth bringing up.
Sure.
Let's see. John Steele says these drugs were originally designed to treat, I cannot begin to pronounce that word, precocious adolescence.
That's where you go through adolescence too early. Basically, it was designed to stop that.
Okay. Reform Thomas says, how can it be positive if up to 20% regret transitioning? Which
I haven't seen any statistics that state that up to 20% regret transitioning, but that would still leave 80% that don't. I'd take those odds any day. Someone said you've got an 80% chance of, winning £1,000 and a 20% chance of losing £1,000. I'd probably go with that.
Yeah, Logan Roy here says feeding into delusions is never helpful. You know that isn't what exactly separates this from basically a delusion.
You can see it on an MRI.
Well,
you can't see a delusion on an MRI. You can see actual brain structure on an MRI.
I mean, brain structure of a transsexual is not or I should say, let's say a male to female transsexual. It's not quite a female brain structure. It's very much.
No, it's not quite a female brain structure, but most female brain structures are not quite a female brain structure. There's a spectrum of female brain structure, and there's a spectrum of male brain structure, and people on both sides sort of lean one way or the other. It's not a binary; it's a scale. So it's more you're quite far. It's a bit like the political spectrum. You know, there's very far left wing, very far right wing, and just because you're left wing or right wing doesn't mean you're very far left wing, can't speak, or right wing. You're on that spectrum, and you can see on this spectrum that male to females and female to males are closer on the spectrum to the gender that they would like to be rather than the gender that they are. And you can't see a delusion on an MRI.
Well, you can see all manner of mental.
Yes,
problems.
but again, those aren't delusions. Those are legitimate existing brain structure or chemical imbalances. They're not delusions.
Well, yes, all right, but
you wouldn't say that someone who was depressed was deluded into thinking that they were depressed, would you?
Well, no, but we treat them in order to correct it. We don't.
Exactly. We treat trans people in order to correct it. It's just
we treat the brain, though. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, why is the problem with the body and not the brain?
Just because you treat the brain in one situation and treat the body in another doesn't mean that one is the preferred treatment. The reason that you treat the brain in depression is because that is the way to resolve that issue. And in trans people, the way to resolve this issue is to treat the body. I would argue as well that the hormones have an impact on the brain as well.
Well, yes, they definitely would. I'm not going to dispute that.
I mean, it's the right treatment for the disorder. No one says that all mental illnesses have to be treated in one specific way. It's the same with physical illnesses. It just seems to be sort of a gross misunderstanding of how mental disorders are treated. That people assume that, well, it's always got to be fix the brain.
Well,
I mean, so just sorry. I thought of another. It's like in cases of depression, you can often resolve depression by exercise and getting fit and healthy, and that is a change in the body that promotes a more positive attitude in the brain.
What about the famous case that I'm sure you've seen of the guy that wanted to be a 6-year-old girl?
Oh God!
And
that's just a creepy dude that wants to be a 6-year-old girl. But that guy's got like childhood fantasies.
Okay, suppose we find that he has a genuinely immature brain structure. I'm not exactly sure where the difference is, because it seems like
I don't know.
I feel this way. So
he hasn't developed the mental pathways that an adult developed.
He might not have. I highly doubt he did, because he was a functional adult for several years. But
I mean, there's no such thing as child hormones that we can give him that will make him a child. I don't know what we do about that. I mean, I think it would be considered detrimental to remain a child forever to begin with, and we probably want to, in that case, even if we had the capacity to make this person a child for some reason, we'd still want to resolve the issue that was preventing their brain pathways from developing normally and becoming an adult, because an adult is a more capable state than a child.
Well, is it really not detrimental to transition them to the opposite sex? You said yourself that society doesn't treat them that well. Well, most of the time it's because and maybe there's a lot of covert ones I'm not seeing, but it seems like a lot of trans people, they don't end up. It's not a very successful transition.
I think
most
that's
of them
just
look a lot
confirmation.
more. I think a lot more of them look like Brianna Wu than Blair White.
I think you'll find that's sort of confirmation bias in that the ones you notice are the ones that stick out, and you just don't notice the ones that don't. So you're obviously going to think, well, the majority of trans people that I've seen don't pass very well because I've seen them. Whereas there could be it's kind of an iceberg deal. Like the tip of the iceberg is what you see, and underneath is what you don't see. So I don't think that's necessarily true that it's that most trans people don't pass very well. I mean, I've certainly not particularly had any issues in my own personal life, and I'm definitely no Blair White.
Okay. To be honest, there's not a whole lot else I wanted to cover. It just was interesting to get somebody outside of my main circle on here.
Thank you for letting me talk about it.
No, that's no problem. I kind of think we're going in circles here. Well, you did kind of step in the lion's den here, and I do appreciate that.
No problem.
Not a lot of people feel like doing that these days. As I said, I don't really see why. I don't really see the difference in a lot of cases because it seems like you're trying to go with how you feel rather than more physical realities of things, but.
Well, I mean,
I'll let you get the last word, and then we'll wrap it up.
Sure. I mean, going with how you feel rather than physical realities. I mean, what are physical realities in this regard? I mean, I can change my secondary sexual characteristics physically. That is a reality. I can change my body so I'm happier with it. That is a physical reality. And it makes me feel happier. So I think I've gone with both the physical realities of the situation, in that I can change myself, and how I feel, in that I felt that I should do that. I think most people, if they could change themselves in a way that made them happier, would do that. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, each to their own. As long as they're not handicapping themselves or causing themselves significant health issues. I mean, even in terms of like smoking and drinking, which do cause significant health issues, I'm totally okay with that. If someone wants to do that, if they're a consenting adult, then fine. And I think it's the same sort of thing. You don't necessarily need to approve of it, but I can change myself. It is a physical reality, and it makes me happier. So why the hell shouldn't I?
All right. Well, that's about all I got for tonight. Thanks for joining us, and Bechtloff out.